Welcome back to Sportsline, everybody, as we continue here on News Channel 5 Plus. Once again, our thanks to Jonathan Hutton from Titans Radio on 104.5 The Zone for joining us, talking a little Super Bowl. I want to get your Super Bowl prediction. 737-7767 is the number to call. Who's going to win Super Bowl 53? And another reminder, you can watch the game over on News Channel 5 Sunday at 5:30. Also Saturday over on News Channel 5. Steve Lehman and myself will be in Atlanta for our Saturday Sports Central Super Bowl 53 preview as we preview the game between the Rams and the Patriots. Hope you'll join us as we continue our Super Week coverage, sponsored by your Middle Tennessee Honda dealers in Atlanta. I will be in Atlanta on Friday. Steve Lehman is there. He's been reporting all week. I'll have another report tonight over on News Channel 5 at 10. Right now, though, we're going to switch gears and talk some hockey. The Predators, remember them? They're ready just about to come off the All-Star break and resume play. They'll take on the Florida Panthers on Friday. And joining us now is another good friend of the show from NHL.com. He covers the Predators. Robbie Stanley joins us. Robbie, I don't remember the NHL All-Star break being this long. Is that me, or has it been this way for a while?
It has not been this long, but I will say the Predators are helped out by it because they had their bye week immediately after the NHL All-Star break. So they have gotten the bye week. Some teams had it right before the All-Star break. A lot of teams have it right after the All-Star break. So it just seems like forever for the Predators, but there have been some games going on this past week. But they're finally back on the ice tomorrow for practice at Centennial Sportsplex. And then they play Friday night in Florida and Saturday night here. So they jump right back into it very quickly.
So what's it been like for you, Robbie? It's Super Bowl week. You haven't had a lot going on with the Preds. They haven't practiced. They haven't played since the All-Star break. What have you been doing with yourself these days?
I've been freezing my butt off, JB, because it's been cold. But really, other than that, I've been trying to catch up on some sleep, just walking around town and just kind of recharging the batteries mentally before their playoff push begins, which begins, I guess, unofficially tomorrow.
Yeah, the unofficial second half of the season gets started. What were your thoughts on All-Star Weekend? I don't know how I feel about this little All-Star tournament. I guess it's somewhat entertaining. Ho-hum, breaking news, Sidney Crosby wins the MVP. I mean, nothing's changed. What were your thoughts on All-Star Weekend in San Jose?
Yeah, it turns out Sidney Crosby is pretty good.
Not bad.
Sport of ice hockey, in case you didn't know. And, look. When it was here in Nashville a few years ago, it was the first year they did the 3-on-3 tournament, and I think the idea of doing that is really cool. I mean, let's face it. It's very difficult in a full-contact sport to really simulate a real game in an all-star game, especially when you've got players out there who know that otherwise they would be on their bye week, they would be on vacation, and you're getting them to come out there and participate in your event for a weekend. So it's not like you're ever going to find a solution for the All-Star game where people treat it as if it's an actual game. So from that aspect, I think that makes it a little bit difficult. I do like the skills competition. I think that they've done a really good job in handling that in the way that they do it. But the game itself, you just know going into it, I mean, it just kind of is what it is. The 3-on-3 tournament where nobody gets within 5 feet of each other because they don't want to make contact. And it's not very pleasant to watch, but it just kind of is what it is at this point. It's almost like the NFL Pro Bowl. You just wander out there and you look out there and you see Alvin Kamara on defense and you wonder what in the world they're doing.
Yeah, as a Giants fan, I got real nervous seeing Saquon Barkley out there on defense. I didn't want an injury to happen to him. All that being said, I'll take the NHL All-Star game over the Pro Bowl. That was just an atrocity. Yes,
it was. It was bad. And like you said, you had Saquon Barkley and Kamara out there on defense, and about the second drive of that game, not that I watched any of it, but I would just assume the second drive of that game, you're wondering what in the world people are doing there.
Yeah, the weather wasn't even nice. It was raining. Robbie Stanley is our guest, covers the Predators for NHL.com. Friend of show. Good to have him back on the show. All right, on to more serious matters. Another setback for Austin Watson, suspended yesterday by the NHL indefinitely for alcohol abuse, it looks like. He's going into their substance abuse program. Man, you hate to see that for a guy like Austin Watson, a very likable young man and a darn good player for the Nashville Predators. What have you been able to learn about Austin's situation? What do you know, and where do the Preds go from here regarding Austin Watson?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's not something new with Austin Watson. He's been struggling with alcoholism for a while now, and as we all know, we probably all know somebody either directly or indirectly that's been affected by alcoholism, and obviously it's a very serious thing. So I think the number one priority for the Predators and for Austin Watson is to make sure that he gets better. I mean, there are things that are more important than the sport of ice hockey, and this is certainly one of them. Whether or not he plays another game again in the NHL or for the Predators, I think at this point is immaterial. To me, it's all about making sure that he betters himself and make sure that he's ready to go back and live a normal life for his family and for his new daughter that he's recently had. So that's priority number one. Is there a possibility that Austin Watson has played his last game as a member of the Nashville Predators? Yes, I think there is. I think there's a real possibility that may be the case. We all know what happened last summer and the domestic incident that he had. The Predators gave him a second chance after that incident. I think it's logical to assume that they may not be willing to give him a third chance. So you would hate to see that if that's the case, but maybe that's what it takes to make sure that he gets back on track and gets his life back in order. And if that happens, then it's all worth it, even if he doesn't play another second for the Nashville Predators. So I think the number one priority needs to be making sure that Austin Watson betters himself, betters his life for his family, and if that means sacrificing your career as an NHL player, then so be it.
Yeah, it just goes to show, Robbie, doesn't it, that we don't really know what these guys' lives are away from the rink. You see Austin Watson in the locker room. I've interviewed him hundreds of times. You've interviewed him thousands of times. Seems like I said, seems like a nice young man, but obviously some serious issues away from the hockey rink.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, like you said, JB, that you never really know what somebody is going through, because on the outside, Austin Watson, to me, and I know to you, has always been a very upstanding guy. He's always been nice and generous with his time, is one of the favorites in that locker room among his teammates. So last summer when the domestic incident came out, that was surprising to me just because of all the time I've been around Austin Watson. I've never known him to be anything but a super nice guy. But obviously he's been dealing with this demon for a while now, and alcoholism can certainly take a hold on people, and it's a very common problem not only in our country but around the world. So you just hope for his sake that he can find a way to get through rehabilitation and get better, and hopefully he'll find a solution that sticks with him for the rest of his life.
Robbie Stanley from NHL.com is our guest. One more question on this, and then we'll move on to other matters. I know the Preds released a statement yesterday basically saying, they support Austin and his family and his struggles. Is any timetable that you know of for Austin to go through this alcohol abuse program, and perhaps a timetable on when the Preds would make a decision on whether or not to keep Austin Watson on the roster?
Yeah, there's no timetable at this point, and it's really just up to the program that he's in when they feel like he's ready and he's available and is well enough to have passed that program. And that could be sometime in the next month. That could be years from now when that takes place. We just don't really know what the timetable is going to be like, and I don't really think the Predators know or have made a decision on what the future for him is going to look like. So I think if you're David Poile and the Predators staff, you have to just assume moving forward this year that you're going to be without the services of Austin Watson. If he's able to come back at some point this season, obviously that would be good news, and you would welcome him back. If you're willing to give him another chance, he would still have a spot in this lineup. But I think if you're David Poile approaching the trade deadline, you just have to go into it assuming that Austin Watson is not going to be a part of this team anymore.
All right, I lied. I got one more Austin Watson question for you. How does his absence affect the Preds on the ice?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big loss. I'm not going to sit here and act like Austin Watson is the difference between them winning a Stanley Cup or not winning a Stanley Cup. He's not Philip Forsberg, and he's not Victor Arvidsson or Pekka Rinne or anybody like that. But there's no question he's an important player for the role that they ask him to play. And there's no coincidence. We've talked about how the power play has struggled all year long for the Predators. Well, if you think back to the beginning of the season, the penalty kill wasn't much better. And Austin Watson came back, and the penalty kill, as soon as he came back, started to get better, and it's been trending upward ever since then. So I'm interested to see how their penalty kill responds to him being out of the lineup. He's a guy that's been a pretty steady force on their third line, so their line combinations are going to have to change at some point too. So like I said, maybe if you're David Poile heading into the trade deadline, maybe you were expecting to make one move to maybe add to your top six and bring in a guy that maybe fits in on the power play. Now with the Austin Watson news, maybe if you're David Poile, you're looking to add two players instead of one, because another thing Austin Watson had was a bunch of size. And if you're playing the Winnipeg Jets in the second round, you're going to need some size at some point with how big those guys are and how difficult it is to get to the middle of the ice against Winnipeg. So I think it could change the approach a little bit for David Poile at the trade deadline.
Robbie Stanley is our guest, covers the Predators for NHL.com, frequent contributor to this fine program, Sportsline here on News Channel 5+. Always great to have Robbie on. Okay, Robbie, all that being put aside for a second, the unofficial second half of the season starts for the Preds, as you said, Friday when they're in Florida. How do you assess the first half, the unofficial first half for the Preds? A lot of injuries to key players, but it feels like they're getting healthier and ready to make a really good second half push. What do you see?
Yeah, and they've survived the injuries, which I think is more difficult than they made it seem. They're still within striking distance of first place in the division, and when you consider that Philip Forsberg and Victor Arvidsson and Kyle Turris have basically missed half of the season, that's a pretty big accomplishment, as well as PK Subban as well. So they've dealt with their fair share of injuries. They're starting to get healthier. I would expect Kyle Turris and Mika Salamaki back sometime in the next week and a half, 2 weeks, and then you're starting to operate with closer to your full lineup. I still think the biggest question mark on this Predators team is the second line, and that was a huge problem last year in the playoffs. Kevin Fiala, Kyle Turris, and Craig Smith. I'm not sure that I've seen enough of those guys together this year to really formulate an opinion because there have been so many injuries. But I do think that's going to be an important piece, because if they're not getting consistent scoring out of that second line, David Poile is going to have to make a move at the trade deadline to address that.
Yeah, you mentioned Victor Arvidsson. Man, what a tear he's been on since he's come back from injury. What do you attribute that to? I know he's a fast, feisty player, but, man, it seems like he's taken it to another level since he's been back.
Yeah, he really has, and I think both he and Philip Forsberg, it's a shame they got hurt this year because, I mean, you're talking about two guys that were probably going to score at least 40 goals, and Victor Arvidsson still may score 40 goals. As crazy as that sounds, missing 24 games this year, he's still on pace to score right around 40 goals, which is just incredible. So those two guys in particular have been great. Ryan Johansson, I thought, really carried the load while they were out. Arvidsson, I just think it's a couple of things. It's a combination of his speed, the tenacity he plays with on a nightly basis, and now he's been in the league long enough where he's starting to learn where the areas are that you have to get open and get room off for your shot, and he's been able to do that so far this year. Like you said, I mean, he's been sensational ever since he came back from injury. So if that top line can keep up the pace what they're playing at right now, they're going to win a lot of hockey games based solely off that line's performance.
Robbie, obviously we know about Pekka Rinne, Vezina Trophy winner last year, having another seemingly solid year this year. But, man, another guy that stepped his game up, I think, is UC Saros. Had a really nice game, the final game before the All-Star break. Had a bunch of saves, I think, in the 40s. I mean, yeah. I would imagine that Peter Laviolette and the coaching staff and the players as well have a lot of confidence in Juice these days, the way he's been playing.
Yeah, they absolutely do, and he's been very good in his last 5 or 6 starts, because there was a stretch this year, probably about a 6 or 7 game stretch with UC Saros, where things were just not going well at all. I mean, he was letting in 4 or 5 goals per game, and he has turned that around in a dramatic way ever since then. His last game right before the break was against the Vegas Golden Knights, and he just completely stole that game for the Predators. I think he made 47 saves in that game. So he's been great as of late, and I think that's huge for 2 reasons. Number one, it does a lot of good for his confidence and his future in that for the Predators. But number 2, it allows you to rest Pekka Rinne more often in the second half of the season to make sure that he's ready to go and fresh come playoff time. So that's very good news for the Predators. I think they're going to use him a lot more in the second half of the season.
Robbie Stanley is our guest from NHL.com. We're talking Preds hockey. Robbie, you kind of hinted as to what David Poile, the GM, might do at the trade deadline, which is coming on quick. It'll be here, obviously, before you know it. Are you thinking top six forward? Obviously, they're solid on defense as long as everybody's healthy. Are you thinking top six forward, maybe a sniper winger or a playmaking center?
Yeah, I think a top six forward is probably the way to go, and I think there's a couple of different options they could do there. The most glaring need, I think, is a little bit of size and a net front presence, which they're just lacking right now. And that would help not only on the second line, but it would also help on the power play, which has just been abysmal all year. They need somebody to get in front of the net and score some of those greasy and gritty goals that they just haven't been able to score enough of this year. So that's need number one. Whether that comes via a center or a wing, to me, it doesn't really matter. You can mix it, and there's so many versatile guys on the Predators that you can have some centermen naturally that play the wing, like a Calle Jarnkrok can do, like Colton Sissons can do. So I think it doesn't matter to me what the position is, as long as you get a top six forward in there that can score some of those greasy goals and help out your power play. I think that's got to be the number one priority for David Poile.
And finally, Robbie, have you checked out PK Subban's reality show? I saw his kind of Tonight Show like All-Star special. It looked pretty good. The sound was down where I was at because you could probably figure where I was at. But it, you know, he had a beautifully tailored suit. Looked like he was having a lot of fun up there. I mean, PK might have a future in this whole broadcasting thing, no?
Yeah, he's pretty good at it. He's got that show. He's doing his reality show now too. And remember, he did some commentary during the playoffs last year in the Stanley Cup Final between Vegas and Washington. So I think he's well versed in the media landscape, the TV landscape, and you know, when his playing days are over and everything's said and done, he could probably do just about whatever he wants to do in that area because he's so naturally gifted at it. I thought he did a really good job with the Tonight Show styled thing that he was doing there. It was really cool and really good. So I think PK Subban has been naturally talented at things like that really his entire life with the personality he has. And I thought that show was no different. He was really, really good.
Yeah, and he's dating Lindsey Vonn, so he's got that going for him. It doesn't suck to be PK Subban these days, no?
Not a bad life, my friend.
Well, Robbie, as always, we appreciate it, man. We look forward to talking to you much more as we get into the second half of the season and into the playoffs with the Preds. Have a great night, my friend.
Thank you, JB. You're the best.
Hey, real quick, Robbie, who do you have in the Super Bowl?
I've got the Patriots winning 31-27. Tommy Brady gets number 6.
That's the exact winner and score that I have. See, great minds think alike.
You're exactly right.
Have a great night, my friend.
You too, brother.
All right. That is the great Robbie Stanley from NHL.com joining us, talking a little Preds hockey. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more Super Bowl. What's your Super Bowl prediction? Who wins? And give me a score. Give me a call after this.